Hey everyone, welcome to Group Text. With me today is Marc Saltarelli, who is the director and producer of a new documentary called Studio One Forever, which is available to pre-order now on Apple TV and comes out October 8th across all video-on-demand platforms. So the documentary tells the untold story of Studio One, the iconic gay disco and cabaret theater located in the heart of West Hollywood. Its history is told through the eyes of the people who worked, performed, and played there during the nearly 20 years it was in business, starting in 1974. It is impossible to imagine how one building could hold so much history for not just the LGBTQ community, but for Hollywood and the entertainment industry as well. Hi, Marc.
Hey, Melissa. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for offering to invite me to your show. I was so grateful almost 4 years ago when you said yes to being a part of our film.
It was so fun that day that we taped to be back in the building because it holds very specific memories for me, which we'll get to. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so I know what Studio One was. Try and explain to people in a nutshell what it was, what it was.
Okay, sure. Well, it was one of the very first gay discos. It was Scott Forbes, who was an optometrist, who wanted to become, run a disco. He started this disco that was in this massive camera factory that was the place where cameras for the Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind were made. I like to say it was gay from the beginning because of the Wizard of Oz. And anyway, he started this in 1974, which was kind of like on the very brink of the gay rights movement. It was a few years after Stonewall. And it held 1,000 guys, mostly, every night for nearly 20 years. So it saw that exciting time of the 70s, went into the tragic days of the 80s, and closed around 1993. And what it provided was a safe haven for gay men to be themselves, because even those of us who lived through that period can tend to forget what it was like and how far we have come. But it's a refresher for us, but also, most importantly, hopefully, it's a teaching tool for younger generations who have no idea, the struggles that we went through.
So Studio One was really like a secret society for gay men in Hollywood. At the time, being discovered when it first opened was such a real fear. And I hate using sort of this kind of lingo, but it was one of the original safe space in Los Angeles. And it wasn't just a club. It housed a cabaret theater in the back, which was called the Backlot for people who are not in the entertainment industry. Every major studio has an area called the Backlot where old sets and things like that are stored. What was fascinating, though, about Studio One Backlot was, the level of people that performed there. And it really turned into an old school supper club that Los Angeles had. I mean, you had Jimmy Stewart there, you had Betty Davis there, you had Elton John there. It really took on a life of its own within the entertainment community and the heterosexual community.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Chita Rivera, who I'm just so honored that she was a part of our film. She passed away a little over a year. I had done the research and found out all of these incredible stories from the 70s that I had no idea. I'd been there in the 80s, but I just thought it was like, Studio 54, they're playing off the name like a ripoff. But actually, it inspired Studio One. But the Backlot was kind of struggling when Scott Forbes opened it originally. He wanted to make use of the entire space of this massive building. And it didn't really take off until Bob Fosse had a heart attack, as Bruce Valanche says. Chita was working on rehearsals for the original Chicago, and famously, Bob Fosse had a heart attack.
And for people who don't know, Bob Fosse was one of the great choreographer, directors, and was in the midst of doing Chicago, the original play, not the movie, at the time. Just for context, for people who don't necessarily know who Bob Fosse is.
Okay. Yeah, and at that point, nobody had ever heard All That Jazz, the famous And All That Jazz. So anyway, they had like 6 months, 8 months possibly to let him recover, and Cheetah couldn't really do anything. So Liza Minnelli, I'm sure you people know who
Yes,
that
yes.
is. She was a very close friend of Cheetah's, and she got Kander and Ebb to write her a one-woman show and convinced her to do it. And they came to the Backlot, and Liza invited all of her famous friends from anybody you can think of from Hollywood legendary royalty came to see her show, sold out every night at this gay disco. So it was like this merging of worlds for the very first time, I think. I can't imagine anything before that. And it became the hit of the town. It was the talk of the town. Everybody who was anybody went to the Backlot or performed at the Backlot. And it was just something incredible. And our film has this wonderful sequence with Alan Eichler, who was a producer who was producing a show for Geraldine Fitzgerald, who starred with Bette Davis in Dark Victory. And she was coming to LA for the AFI tribute to Bette Davis. And they talked Bette Davis into appearing and introducing Geraldine. So we have these amazing photographs. It was so hard to find photographs from back in the 70s, but he came not only with his story, but these amazing photos. This one of Bette Davis smoking. I added a little bit of smoke to it. I just love that shot so much in the Backlot. And Alan, I just have to say, when he saw the finished film, we were having fundraisers, he really became our angel, and we wouldn't have been able to finish it because, as you know, music licensing is really expensive. And we're just so grateful to Alan for that.
One of the things that we learned, which I did not know in the documentary, is to get to the cabaret room, the Backlot, there was only one entrance to the club. And all these people had to walk through the gay disco part, although the music hadn't started at that point. But there were always people there when what we would call now pre-partying. Was there apprehension in the beginning by some of the celebrities to be seen walking through?
I think there may have been. Now, after the first few years, they realized that they needed to get a different entrance, and that's actually most of the celebrities would come up the middle entrance, the VIP entrance, if you will. But in the very early days, yeah, they would have to walk through the disco. And I think, Liza was very convincing of her friends, and they wanted to see Cheetah. And they got to hear All That Jazz for the first time anywhere. And Cheetah said that she was so thrilled to kind of set the record straight that she's the reason the Backlot turned into what it did. And she said that, this is not in the film, she actually rebuilt the stage because, she had dancers. So she literally built the Backlot in more ways than one. We went to New York and had an incredible interview with her. And, when you meet legends, sometimes you're disappointed, but Cheetah was everything you could imagine. Generous, grateful. I'm so grateful that she was part of it. And she even agreed to go to the theater on Broadway, the 48th Street Theater, which is now Hamilton, and do a little reminiscing outside the stage door. And I asked her, would you mind doing a few Fosse poses? And she said, sure. So I got to be Bob Fosse for a minute in my mind, I guess. Yeah.
One of the things that I find very interesting is when you take a step back and actually look at Studio One's place in the gay culture and history, people don't know it was such an important place. It honestly, in hindsight, is as influential as Harvey Milk in San Francisco, Stonewall in New York. Why do you think it's kind of such an afterthought when it was so groundbreaking?
Well, I think there comes a time when people realize it's time to remember, and those memories are not only joyful for the people who survived from the 70s on, but also very painful. The 80s, suddenly everybody around them were dropping like flies, and there was no interest in helping. The government, our president, Mr. Whatever Reagan, didn't mention AIDS once until the very last minute when he's out the door. And can you imagine how different things might have been? How many less people may have died if he had gotten on it the way COVID was tackled? But yeah, I think that's part of the reason, to answer your question, that the memories may be too difficult, and somehow it just got kind of forgotten about until this developer had plans to level the building and build this multi-million dollar luxury hotel and restaurant development.
One of the things that people are sort of rediscovering, which actually is part of my family history, was a very famous performance that my mother did at the Backlot. Mm-hmm. At the time, AIDS crisis was just breaking. A number of celebrities, specifically my mother and Elizabeth Taylor and a lot of other people, were losing a tremendous amount of friends to something that wasn't even called HIV/AIDS. It was still at the very beginning of when people were still calling it gay cancer and gay pneumonia. Mm-hmm. And my mother decided to do something. And she decided to do the first AIDS HIV fundraiser or public fundraiser with a special performance at Studio One Backlot. It was so controversial that the death threats and the hate that came out at my family was so bad that I had to go to school with bodyguards. Now, and maybe not their best parenting decision, my parents decided to take me with them to the performance with the assumption that if it was going to get blown up, at least we're all gone together. Maybe not the most solid parenting decision in hindsight. Just, thinking about that.
Yeah.
Why was it the perfect venue to hold that event? Because people still talk about it because it was so risky.
Yeah, I mean, it was the very first fundraiser for APLA that had just gotten off the ground. Studio One was, before Studio One, all of the bars were kind of shuttered and you go in a back entrance and you sneak around, but you had to stand in this line at Studio One to get in and go up the stairs if you could get in, but we'll talk about that later. And so it was the first open club to exist, at least in LA. And I think that's probably the reason, because it appealed to not only, gay people, obviously, but sort of it had merged with the entire community of Hollywood. And, at that time it was impossible for major stars to appear for something benefiting AIDS. The stigma was so great. And so your mother was really the first one who was brave enough to, like you said, to take a stand. Yeah, your mother was the very first person major star to really take a stand, and we all have to understand that Elizabeth Taylor did wonderful things, but your mom was years before she started, and I believe you said, because I've been saying it at Q&A, so I just want to confirm that there was not a single AIDS organization in Los Angeles that honored her. Is that true?
I believe, yeah. They were all very, very quick to honor Elizabeth, who deserved it. She took it to an international level. But I was kind of always surprised by that. There was acknowledgement, but I don't think there was ever kind of that huge public thank you. But that's okay. That's the story of my mom's career. Like, whatever. They've had Elizabeth. They now have Sharon Stone. It's all good. Everyone's working for the cause. But I'm always up for a free meal and a reason to wear some sort of spectacular dress. Just putting that out there. So I want to talk about the documentary again. The story starts with what you mentioned, the city of West Hollywood wanting to turn the space into a luxury hotel. And it tracks through the telling of this story the fight to prevent that. How emotional did everyone become in the beginning hearing that they wanted to tear this down? And again, going back to acknowledging things, not acknowledging its importance in the history of Los Angeles.
Well, I don't think the developer had any idea what that truly ugly eyesore of building meant to so many people until two women, Kate and Chrissy, found out, and they started a Save the Factory movement with a website online, and then everybody started finding out, and they went to city council meetings of West Hollywood. Former Mayor John Duran was kind of spearheaded the project. I think they had 70 people show up to a meeting. And, these were all men, primarily of a certain age, who survived the era. And that building, in their minds represented so much joy and pain. And John was able to work out with the developer. I won't tell you the details of it, but a way to recognize the buildings. The developer had really no clue of the significance of that building until two women, Kate and Chrissy, found out. They were very anti-developer, I guess, and they wanted to save it. They wanted to turn it into a disco again, and they started the Save the Factory movement with a website. And so everybody who was still here with us from of a certain age, who lived through those times, rose up, went to city council meetings, said, "You can't tear this place down. This is our history. This is our life. You can't just level it and erase it." And thanks to John Duran, who was the mayor of West Hollywood at the time, he made arrangements with the developer. You have to see the movie what those arrangements will be. The developer, to their credit, they listened to the stories, and they got a deeper understanding of what that place meant. So yeah, if it weren't for Kate and Chrissy, people might have not even realized that it was gone. But you have to see the movie to find out what happens.
Exactly. I'm not going to give it away. How did you track down so many of the OGs that were in Studio One at its inception, at its opening?
Yeah.
How did you find everyone?
Well, believe it or not, it was a lot easier than I expected. When we started filming, we had 2 days in the factory, and one of those was the day we interviewed you in the building before it was going to be, taken apart. And I put a thing on Facebook, and I just, my inbox got filled with people saying, "Oh my God, I have this story," and they would go on for 10 pages and tell me what that meant to them. And I guess I realized then just how important it was to a group of people, and how, like you said, I mean, it was sort of a lost history in a way. John Duran was instrumental in getting me a lot of the people, including Michael Koth, who was the front bartender for many years, the face of Studio One, the star of Studio One. And boy, his story when we were filming at his old station in that building was just so emotional. And I realized what a powerful film we had here, what a powerful story. And he's sort of the heart of our movie. We track him from the beginning all the way to today. And his story really makes the film special. And John also, connected me with other people, and it was a process. A couple of months after we started filming, COVID happened, so I had a lot of time on my hands to kind of, work with the footage we had, figure out who we should approach, like Cheetah, and other people. And yeah, like a documentary, is not like a narrative film where you have a script, you know where it's going, you film it, and you get it out there. Documentary, you kind of have an idea of what the film will be, but it kind of reveals itself as you go along through people's stories, and that's what happened. And it's been almost 4 years since we filmed back in October of 2019, I think it was.
You share with us, again, you just mentioned a lot of the stories from the original patrons who are the ones that are still alive. One thing that struck me when they talk about it was the profound impact it had across the board in these men's lives. It wasn't just, woo, I can go dancing and be with others, that it really changed the trajectory of their lives. Were you kind of shocked at that level of depth from the experience?
Starting with Michael Koth and even John Duran, the interviews kind of played out the way the movie does. We'd start reminiscing about the glory days of the '70s, and disco, and finally we can just have a place, to find our tribe and to go and be ourselves, and all the stars and celebrities who were joining us. It was like a crazy, wild, unbelievable time for gay people. Because prior to that, you were kind of, in the shadows, basically, afraid for your life from not only other people, homophobes, but the police. And so this is what that provided. And mix that in, the interview would then, I'd save that for the last part, would then go into the loss and the tragedy of the AIDS crisis. And people would inevitably break down, and sometimes we'd have to stop because that emotion is still right there, 40 years later, 30, 40. And yeah, it's right there, ready to come up at any moment. Can you imagine losing 30 friends within a few years? That was a really tough time for people. And I think that's what that building represented. It was a gathering place during the '80s, Your mom was our champion, and you as well. And yeah, I think that's why.
What has the response been? Because I know you've been doing a lot of film festivals and press. And I'm trying not to give away too much. What has the response been?
It's been amazing. We premiered it at Outfest last July, and the Outfest folks, I guess, didn't understand the power that it would have for this community particularly. Don't know how that could be, but yeah, we had lines going around the block, and 20 people who had tickets were not able to get in. So it was pretty enormous for our first screening. And Bruce Valanche has been such a trooper and such a supporter from day one. And then going on to other festivals, even if, I always ask the audience, does anybody here, have you ever been to Studio One? And, a few hands would go up, depending on where you are. Palm Springs, everybody. Palm Springs was our biggest fan, I guess. But anyway, I went to a festival in Durham, North Carolina, and I said, who here has ever heard of Studio One or been to? Nobody. But it won the audience award. So people can connect and relate to it. They just transfer their club in North Carolina with that club. And it's really more than just about this one club, although it is about that. It's about that whole era and remembering it. And that's really what made me, want to do it and spend all of this time in my life to do it and to try to do it as well as I could. It really is preservation of an era that's really important for LGBTQ history. And I'm really honored. Just yesterday, the Margaret Herrick Academy Library of the Academy of Motion Pictures wrote to me, and they want to include a transcript to be in their permanent collection forever. And that's really, I'm honored and thrilled that the work I did is going to be saved, for future generations as long as we have a planet. So,
well, lines around the block. How very
yeah.
Studio One. Marc, thank you so much. Studio One Forever is available for pre-order on Apple TV and now. Oh, sorry. Studio One Forever is available for pre-order on Apple TV now and released October 8th on all video on demand platforms. Everyone needs to watch this. It's really fascinating. Marc, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. It's been great. Also, you can go to studio1forever.com and have all the info and reviews and everything.